the SPLC was not dismantling these groups. It was instead manufacturing the extremism it purports to oppose by paying sources to stoke racial hatred.
America, for 30 years, one organization in Alabama told the entire country who the racists were. Apple wrote them $1 million check. JP Morgan Chase wrote $500,000. George Clooney donated. Tim Cook tweeted about him. CNN published their list of hate groups like it came straight from the Bible. The FBI used it. The bank used it. Tech companies used it to kick organizations off their platforms. On April 21st, 2026, a federal grand jury handed that same organization, the Southern Poverty Law Center, an 11-count criminal indictment. But here's the part that should make every single person who ever donated to them feel sick. The indictment says they had a paid employee sitting inside the leadership group that planned the 2017 Charlottesville rally. You remember that one. The same rally where Heather Heyer was killed. The same rally that caused their fundraising to jump from $51 million to $133 million in a single year. They weren't just paying hate groups. They were collecting millions off of a tragedy where their own paid guy was sitting inside the room where it was all planned.
Imagine a donor to the SPLC if they were told, by the way, we're going to give the money you're giving us to the Ku Klux Klan.
What is up, guys? Tyson De La Cruz here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. Before we get into the charges, I need you to understand what kind of power this organization actually had. Because once you see that, the silence from everybody else who trusted them for 30 years makes a lot more sense. Think of the SPLC like the referees in a basketball game. The referee calls the fouls. The referee decides who cheats. Everyone in the stand trusts the referee because they're supposed to be a neutral party. That's the job. The SPLC had a hate map. It was basically a public list posted on their website showing where hate groups were operating all over the United States. News channels showed it on their screen. Banks looked at it when they're making decisions on which organizations to do business with. Tech companies used it to decide who was banned from what. And for years, the FBI treated it as some type of credible source. The problem, you might ask? The problem, you guys, look what they put on the map alongside actual white supremacist groups.
Let's put up this hate group map that the SPLC put out that included groups like the Family Research Council. I mean, Victor, if you look at this, you would think there's just hate crawling across the entire country. And, you know, you better just stay in your house and hunker down.
Yeah, they're bullies and they intimidate people. They're sort of like the McCarthyites of the 1950s. I've been a target of them for just speaking about in support of assimilation, integration, and intermarriage in the case of immigrants. And they feel that is somehow discriminatory. So they're riding high because of the Charlottesville incident, and they've got a lot of donations, and it's gone to their head. And they're hubristic, and they better be careful because I think they're going to create a backlash not only among the American people, but maybe the corporations that appease them.
A Christian legal group, a family policy organization on the same map as the Klan. And Apple read that map and wrote a check. Now, here's the thing about being a nonprofit that most people don't really think about. A nonprofit obviously doesn't pay taxes. It's a major financial benefit of being a nonprofit. But in exchange for that benefit, the law says you have to be completely honest with the people who donate to you and where the money goes. You can't raise funds saying, help us fight the KKK, and then secretly give part of that money to KKK members. That's not a gray area there. That is wire fraud. That is exactly what the grand jury said happened. Let me quickly make the indictment as simple as possible here. 9 years from 2014 to 2023, more than $3 million paid out. 8 different individuals were active members or leaders inside the exact hate groups the SPLC was publicly claiming to destroy. An imperial wizard of the Ku Klux Klan received payments. A leader of the National Socialist Movement, that's a neo-Nazi organization, received payments. A leader of the Aryan Nations received payments. But here's the piece that turns a political story into a criminal one. They didn't just write checks from the SPLC bank account. That would have been too obvious here. They invented fake companies. Companies, you guys, with 0 employees that existed only on paper. They ran money through those fake companies and organizations so that banks and donors could never trace the cash where it actually went and what it was actually going for. Listen to what those fake companies were called.
They set up shell companies and entities around America so that the financial institutions that we rely on as everyday Americans were deceived in believing that money was not coming from the Southern Poverty Law Center in the perpetration of this scheme and fraud, but rather fictitious entities they stood up to perpetuate this ongoing fraud.
Center Investigative Agency, Fox Photography, Rare Books Warehouse. 3 invented businesses with no employees, no real operations, used entirely to hide where the money was actually going. Somebody sat down and made up those names on purpose here. 4 of the 11 criminal charges came specifically from fake paperwork the SPLC executives signed when they opened up those bank accounts. When you open up a business bank account, you have to tell the bank what your company actually does here. They lied on that paperwork as well in writing 4 times. That's bank fraud. And now it's a federal charge. I want to be very careful here for the YouTube purposes. I'm going to tell you exactly what the government charged, not more, not less, because the actual facts are already more than enough. The indictment identifies somebody they call F-37. That's how the government protects an informant's identity, with the letter and the number instead of their real name. Here is word for word what the indictment says F-37 did. F-37 was a member of an online leadership chat group that planned the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. F-37 attended that rally at the direction of the SPLC. F-37 made racist postings under the supervision of the SPLC. F-37 helped coordinate transportation to the event for several attendees. The SPLC paid F-37 more than $270,000 between 2015 and 2023.
The indictment also alleges that more than $3 million in donations was, quote, secretly funneled to individuals associated with far-right hate groups, associated with groups like neo-Nazis, the Aryan Nation, and Ku Klux Klan associated groups.
Heather Heyer was 32 years old. She was at the rally peacefully counter-protesting. A white nationalist drove his car into the crowd and killed her. She left behind a mother named Susan, and right now the federal government is saying the organization that turned Heather Heyer's death into an $82 million fundraising surge had a person on their payroll sitting in the planned group that put that rally all together. Here is the financial picture that makes this whole thing feel designed. In 2016, the year before Charlottesville, the SPLC raised $51 million. The rally happened in August 2017. By October 2017, they had raised $133 million. That is a $82 million increase in 1 year, driven almost entirely by outraged Americans who saw what happened in that street and decided to send money to an organization that they believed was fighting people like the ones who showed up in Charlottesville. Apple gave $1 million specifically because of Charlottesville. Tim Cook made a public announcement about it. JP Morgan gave $500,000. Major corporations fell in line. CNN named SPLC a credible authority on extremism and ran their content without questions. And the indictment says all of that money was raised by an organization that had one of their paid people inside the leadership group planning the very things those donations were responding to.
They attacked us nonstop, basically putting us on a hate map, not only the national organization, but individual chapters as well. And they put us in the same box as murders, racist, really hate groups like the KKK. And we're just moms, volunteer moms, trying to protect our children and, make sure the curriculum is good, or don't force masks on our kids or vaccines on our kids. Simple parental rights. And they attacked us. And, that has real world consequences in real time.
Moms for Liberty on the same hate map as the organizations the SPLC was secretly paying millions to. The list destroyed careers and canceled events, while the organization making the list was funding the groups they claim to oppose. Now here's the political layer that most outlets are burying. This investigation did not begin in 2025. Acting Attorney General Blanche confirmed at the April 21st press conference that this case was opened during the Biden administration. Somebody at the Department of Justice under Biden looked at the SPLC's financials, saw what was happening with those shell companies, and opened up a criminal investigation. And then somebody miraculously made the decision to close it. The acting AG of the United States does not know why the previous administration killed a fraud investigation into the most politically connected nonprofits in America. That sentence alone should be a front page story on every single newspaper in the country. The SPLC is not politically neutral. They funded Democrat-aligned causes. They sue Republican policies. Their hate map specifically targets conservative and Christian organizations. For decades, they operated as a political weapon with a nonprofit exemption. The Biden DOJ had evidence of fraud. They passed on this situation, and no one in mainstream media has asked why. Trump's DOJ opened it in 2025. By April 2026, 15 months later, there was a grand jury, an 11-page indictment, and a joint FBI and IRS criminal investigation. 6 months before a single charge was filed, Kash Patel already pulled the plug. In April 2025, 6 months before the indictment, Patel officially ended the FBI's partnership with the SPLC. He called them a partisan schmear machine on record. You know, the schmear like the cream cheese on the bagels. He told the entire country that the SPLC was no longer a credible source for the nation's top law enforcement agency. Democrats obviously said it was political. CNN ran it as an attack on civil rights. The SPLC called it retaliation and said they were being targeted for their work. 6 months later, Kash Patel stood at a federal podium confirming a grand jury had agreed with him.
Because money never lies, and they got caught. As the Attorney General said, these charges are varying, they are widespread and wide-ranging, and this investigation is very much ongoing. Today, we're here to announce the charges of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and this investigation and the individuals who are responsible will be brought to justice.
Every reporter in that room came from a network that once treated the SPLC as the golden standard for truth, and the FBI director just said, that money never lies. The SPLC's defense is that paying informants inside extremist groups is the same thing that the FBI does. And there is a real legal argument there that will probably play out in court. But watch where their argument breaks down.
To understand what is being charged, the government is alleging that the Southern Poverty Law Center used paid informants to infiltrate groups like the KKK, Nazi organizations, and that those payments are fraudulent in the sense that they came from shell organizations. If you think about that argument, though, taken to its logical end, what the reason there are shell corporations that are set up to make these payments is that if the payments said Southern Poverty Law Center, the individual's anonymity would be compromised. Their safety, maybe even their lives, would be at risk.
How strong is the Justice Department's case here, and what do they need to show in order to prove this in court?
In order to show fraud here, they need to show that there was a material misrepresentation that harmed a victim, i.e. that the donors to the Southern Poverty Law Center were, in essence, defrauded because the money that was donated to the organization was then used, in the government's terms, to support the organizations that are purported to be the targets of the Southern Poverty Law Center.
The FBI has to report what it does with informants in Congress. The SPLC reported what it did with donor money to nobody. That's the difference. And that difference is an 11-count federal indictment. Being on the SPLC hate map had real consequences for real people. And in some cases, those consequences were violent.
I testified in Congress about this exact topic because the SPLC has been tied to at least 3 violent attacks against conservatives. You had the attack on the Family Research Council, where a gunman showed up with a bag of with a handgun and a bag of Chick-fil-A sandwiches, planning to shoot everyone in the building and smear a sandwich in their face. He said he got the target from the SPLC. You also had the shooter in the Steve Scalise shooting, that congressional baseball game practice where Steve Scalise almost died. He had liked the SPLC on Facebook, and now you have the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk just months after the SPLC puts Turning Point on the hate map. I said it then, and I'll say it again now. It is long past time that the SPLC takes mainstream conservative and Christian groups off that map.
3 different shooters, 3 different targets, all 3 cited the SPLC. And the SPLC kept updating and expanding that same map while secretly paying the people already on it. Chuck Schumer, called this indictment an assault on free expression and said it should send chills down every spine of every American. The same organization that sent chills down the spines of volunteer moms by putting them on hate maps with the KKK. Schumer says their indictment is the problem. America, think about it like this. If you ran a home alarm company, you need people to be scared of burglars. You don't want crime to disappear. And if you're willing to do something wrong, the easiest way to keep customers paying is to make sure that there's always burglars close enough to justify their fear. Here are 2 things not mentioned yet. 2 of the 8 informants they paid received more than $1 million each over that 9-year period. One of them stole documents from a violent extremist organization and handed them to the SPLC. Then the SPLC paid a completely separate person $6,000 to falsely confess to stealing those documents to protect the cover of the more valuable informant. They built a crime to protect a crime, to hide a crime, and they called the whole thing charity. Donors sent money because they were scared. The indictment says the SPLC helped make sure the fear never ran out. The receipts don't care what Senator Chuck Schumer calls it. Let me know what you think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.